Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Operations Committee meeting of the Bi-State Development Board to order on Friday, June 10th, 2022 at 8:30 a.m. Myra, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Windmiller,
Present.
Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Galladay, Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Beach,
Here.
Commissioner Simmons,
Here.
Commissioner Costello, Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Moore, and Commissioner Gladney.
Present.
Thank you. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the March 18th, 2022 Operations Committee open meeting. These meetings have been provided in your board packet. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The next item was originally a law enforcement services agreement with Kevin Scott, head of public safety for Bi-State. He is delayed a little bit this morning, so we're going to move that agenda item. We'll get back to it either in the operations committee or we'll move it to the audit committee meeting. So I'm going to move. Yes.
Chair Windmiller, excuse me, but I think we skipped public comment, item number 3.
We did. I'm so sorry. And there was a public comment card received. So Myra, could you please read that public comment?
Yes, we had one public comment received from Shannon Vila regarding unacceptable 70 grand service detours during special events that defeat the purpose of transit. Her comments were, I have 2 areas of concern regarding Metro bus operations. Number 1, 70 grand poor operations after 6 p.m. every day is of primary concern. As you are well aware, the 70 grand has historically been Metro's heaviest ridership and most productive bus line as a total route per hour of service and per mile of service. The route seems to have ample running time to allow for nearly 100% on-time performance. However, and especially after the reduction of the route to 30-minute frequencies after the 6 p.m. daily, this route has suffered tremendously, amounting to as much as 2 hours of time between buses. VOC attempts to try to make buses get back on schedule with very little success, and the times they do make a bus run special or drop off only, there is not always a bus following within 5 to even 10 minutes. Doing many times requires a very long wait for riders bypassed due to the bus going special or drop off only. Last night on Thursday, June 2nd, I have a specific example when this should not have been done, leading to a 1 hour and 47-minute gap at Loughborough Commons northbound. The operator made to special to Broadway Taylor TC was actually rightfully hesitant to special himself, knowing there would be passengers miss. I believe there needs to be a dedicated mobile TSM for the 70 grand, and since I know TSMs don't have laptops, they should use, and a website was given, from a mobile device to see where buses are at, scheduled adherence, and service gaps. The TSM would then be able to adjust service as needed, as well as notify riders at key stops of service delays or cuts in service. An alternative would be to divide 70 grand into 2 segments with a 70 north and 70 south. As you would guess, one route would run from Grand Station north to Broadway Taylor TC, and one route would run from Grand Station to Loughborough Commons. One bus would be needed for each. There would also be a 70 that would run the entire route end to end. 70 north and 70 buses can run with 60-foot buses, while the 70s would have to be a 40-foot bus due to being unable to recharge at Broadway Taylor TC. Resource requirements would remain at 3 buses after 6 p.m., although a 4th bus can be added for improved frequency or as a strategic bus to fill in service gaps as needed. Number 2, detours during times of heavy traffic affected routes 90 Hampton and 34 Earth City. These routes are routinely detoured without notice to passengers and with no alert on the Metro website or transit app, and no notice at affected stops. As you know, with a workforce shortage, the Forest Park Trolley has ceased operations ever since 2020. The route was created to allow for reliable 90 Hampton service to bypass Forest Park on weekends during the day until about 7 p.m. With the discontinued route, 90 Hampton buses are being routinely detoured away from Forest Park. Exact detours are not always followed, with most operators using Forest Park Parkway versus the prescribed use of Lindell to Skinker and vice versa for northbound trips. However, with this change, passengers have no reliable service in Forest Park, particularly during high-demand days like weekend with the African Arts Festival at the World's Fair Pavilion. I attended this and had to wait for 90 Hampton buses outside the park. 34 Earth City also is frequently detoured due to traffic in the areas of the Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Detouring around high-traffic areas while keeping a bus on time causes riders to be stranded or have to walk to another stop, which in many cases is over 30 minutes away. My suggestion is to not detour buses around heavy traffic, as it skips stops, most key for riders, both for dependent riders and riders Metro wants to attract.
And Chair, I have asked Chuck Stewart to address a couple of these public comments in his ops report. So we will make a comment about that.
Great, thank you. We always appreciate hearing from the public, especially when it concerns our service. So I'm glad that we'll hear more about these issues during Mr. Stewart's report. And again, I apologize for skipping the public comment piece. The next piece, as I said, was supposed to be the law enforcement services agreement. And since Kevin is not available right now, we're going to move to the cooperation agreement. Item number 6, operation and maintenance of Cortex Metrolink Plaza and bike path located along the Brookline Greenway. And I would ask Chuck Stewart for comments.
Good morning, Commissioners. This agreement we would like for you to approve and move forward to the board for approval. This is concerning our Cortex location. As you know, Cortex was completed in 2018. It was a cooperative effort between Cortex and Greenways, the bike path, and of course we have a station there and a plaza. So basically this is an agreement between those entities to maintain the plaza, the station, and the bike trail that is nearby. And bottom line, what's agreed upon here is that Cortex would be responsible for the maintenance of the plaza and the bike trail, and we would be responsible for the maintenance of our station. We would be providing the financial requirements for both, but Cortex would be contracting with someone in terms of the maintenance of the station. I'm sorry, the plaza and the bike trail. So this is essentially a cooperative agreement in order to maintain Cortex, the bike trail, and the plaza. And we are asking for your approval.
Are there questions from the committee?
Do we have a dollar figure on what this is going to
No,
cost?
I do not. I do not. I do not have a dollar figure as to how much this would cost. I can certainly get that provided to the board at a later time prior to your board meeting so that we have a understanding as to what the financial obligation is here.
I would like to know what that was going to be. That's my comment.
Okay.
So the approval, Chuck, is not for any specific amount. It's for the general terms of the contract.
It's the terms of who's responsible for what. Yes.
Okay. So would it be more appropriate for us to have the dollar amount, or what is the reason to approve this without the financial piece of it being worked out?
Well, I agree that you should have an idea of the financial impact of this contract. Primarily bringing it today was to introduce it as a cooperative agreement and detail each person's or each entity's responsibility as it relates to the operations and maintenance of this area. So yes, I think it is appropriate that we get a number and bring that back to you prior to final approval at the board meeting. Or I can provide that in advance of that.
Madam Chair, it's Deborah Moore. Would it be appropriate then to suspend a vote on this matter until we have full information, maybe just deferring it to a later meeting?
I think that's certainly a possibility. That's why I asked the question, which is if we approve in concept the responsibilities of all the parties that are attached to the contract, does that obligate us financially for anything? I guess that's my question, and perhaps that's something that needs to go to our legal counsel. Or I guess what I'm asking is, first of all, are we going to put things, is this going to delay any maintenance? And if not, can we come back with a contract that includes the financial responsibilities of each of the parties before we take a vote on it?
I think, I'm sorry. I think one of the commissioners was talking. Yeah. I would like Barb King, could you provide some input on that? I think this is something that's been delayed for a period of time. I'm not sure exactly why. And so Barb, can you provide some background on this situation?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As Mr. Stewart said, this is a cooperative agreement about maintaining the plaza, the station, and the bike path with Cortex and Great Rivers Greenway. And the whole idea of Cortex providing the general maintenance is that they already have landscapers and greenscapers working in the area for the Cortex Commons, and it was just felt that it would be more cost-effective and efficient for their maintenance, their landscaping and their maintenance crews that are already out there working in the area just to handle that area of the plaza, and it wouldn't be as cost-effective for Bi-State to specifically address those kind of ongoing day-to-day kind of issues. So that's why that aspect of the agreement regarding the plaza and Bi-State is developed into the agreement. So they would just invoice us for the the amounts that would pertain to the greenscaping and the maintenance of the plaza, just on that kind of day-to-day kind of basis.
I have a question then, because I'm inclined to sort of agree with Commissioner Simmons here. Is there a way, and I think I understand what Commissioner Windmiller is saying too, is there a way we can, I don't want to unduly hold this up when it's already been held up, but is there a way we can sort of agree to the framework here and have final agreement pending some sort of an estimate? I get if it's going to be an invoice we receive monthly or quarterly, whatever, we might not know an exact estimate, but to at least give the board an estimate to say we think it'll be in this range, and then we don't give final approval until we have that number. Because I'm trying to balance not wanting to hold things up that have already been held up, but also not committing the agency to pay a sum of money that we don't have a grasp on what it is. And those are the two things we're fighting with, I think.
Commissioner Gladney, we could certainly hold this particular agenda item over to the board meeting, which is just going to be in 2 weeks at the end of June, and obtain that estimated information from Cortex and provide it to the board. And at that point, you would have more information and be able to be fully informed whether, you wanted to move forward with this agreement or not at that time.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we table this until the meeting, as Barbara's saying.
So just to clarify, first of all, is there a second for that motion?
More seconds.
Thank you. We can have a discussion about that now. I'm inclined to agree. What I want to know is, does the contract need to come back to the operations committee prior to going to the board? Because that then would create a situation that would be a delay. So my question is, on Mr. Simmons' motion, can we still, if we table this, can we go right to the board meeting, or do we have to go back through operations committee?
If I'm Chair Windmiller, if I may, we would not, because you've already had the discussion and the vetting of the issue and the agenda item at this meeting. It's just if the additional information that you're requesting is satisfactory, then you can move forward with your approval at the board meeting or not at that time.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the motion and second? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thanks very much. So we'll take that up at the board meeting in a few weeks.
Chair,
Sure.
if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt again. Mr. Scott has joined us, so in order to maybe stay with the good of the order, although we're one item off, I do have him available if we may go back to item number 5.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. We'll go to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Law Enforcement Services Agreement between Bi-State Development Agency, St. Clair County, Illinois, for services provided by St. Clair County, Illinois Sheriff's Department. And Mr. Scott will give us comments.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Sorry for the technical issues we were having. So we are seeking committee approval this morning on the proposed renewal of the Law Enforcement Services Agreement with St. Clair County Sheriff's Department. They provide the primary law enforcement patrol service on the Metrolink light rail alignment within St. Clair County. And they also collaborate with their Metrolink counterparts from the St. Louis County Police and City Police on a daily basis in information sharing and investigative efforts. So please note that the St. Clair County Metrolink law enforcement assignment consists of 15 deputies, one holding the rank of lieutenant, and that has historically been the case, or master sergeant. That would be a command level position, so lieutenant or master sergeant. And then there are 2 field supervisor level positions that hold the rank of sergeant, and 12 street patrol deputies assigned to the task force. So our current 1-year agreement expires on June 30th, 2022. And our agreements with St. Clair County with the Sheriff's Department have historically been for 1 year. One of the things that we found when we got here is all 3 of the law enforcement agreements that we have to manage expire at different times, having different terms. So I want to go into a little bit more about that in just a moment. But in preparation, please find our proposed renewal, which if you approve, will commence on July 1, 2022. And this first term of the agreement will be for 18 months. And that's where the anomaly is, and I'll go back to that in just one moment. And that term 1, again, commencing on July 1 of 2022 and ending on December 31st of 2023. Now, in conjunction with this first 18-month term, included in the packet is a document entitled Exhibit A, That is the monthly pay schedule that would be in effect under this new agreement. It also shows the average fringe benefit costs and overtime allocations as well. Those are paid out as needed. Now, the same agreement, after the first 18-month term expires, allows for an additional term of 12 months. And that would commence on January 1, 2024, and would terminate on December 31st of 2024. At the initiation of the second term, we would produce another cost exhibit with St. Clair County and provide that for board consideration. Now, why are we doing this, the additional 18-month term, first term? The current St. Louis City policing contract expires on December 31st, 2024. So it is our goal to align all three of our law enforcement agreements with the same expiration. It just makes things much easier for us to manage. So with your recent approval of the St. Louis County agreement just a few months ago with the same language and the same term specifications, and hopefully the approval of this renewal with St. Louis County or the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department, this alignment will be achieved and will make for a more of an efficient process. So all three law enforcement contracts would term out on December 31st, 2024. Now, this new agreement reflects no modifications in service levels from the current agreement. Again, the aforementioned detachment, the personnel that I just went through from the Sheriff's Department assigned to this detail, just for a little bit of a background, they provide the dedicated law enforcement service to Metrolink in Illinois. And they're focused on daily law enforcement and ordinance enforcement affecting Metrolink and the platforms and the light rail vehicles. And as with any of our law enforcement partners, they are an imperative part of this layered security structure. So staff is respectfully recommending that the Operations Committee approve the renewal and send said agreement to the full Board of Commissioners for final approval. And we want to thank you for your consideration in this matter and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Kevin. Are there questions from the commissioners? Kevin, I just have one question, which is, how do our contracts line up in terms of financial requirements? You know, St. Louis County versus St. Louis City versus St. Clair County. Are there differences in the pay rates? Are there differences? And I don't have objection to that. I'm just curious about the differences in how we negotiate these contracts.
So certainly there are differences in pay rates with each of the organizations. And that's one of the reasons why we provide a cost exhibit. So the costs obviously come from St. Clair County. They're certainly dependent on their labor agreement. St. Louis County has the same situation. St. Louis City also has the same situation. So the costs are indicative on what the impact is to their organizations, if that makes sense. As far as the total cost of the contracts, obviously that impacts it, but the number of officers assigned to the detachments from each of the law enforcement agencies obviously would also impact that.
So the cost is dependent on the agency or the municipality?
Yeah, so all three of the, yes, that is correct. So we have of the three primary law enforcement agreements, two are with counties, St. Louis and St. Clair, and then we have the one agreement with the city of St. Louis. So it is dependent on their cost.
I have a question. And Kevin, we may have discussed this the other day. What is the percentage of the increase from the contract moving forward to what it currently is?
So it's a little bit apples to oranges because the current contract term is 12 months. The new one is 18 months. But the monthly increase would be just 3.8% of the monthly payout. And that does not include what they have calculated. If you look at the cost exhibit at the bottom where they talk about the overtime budget and the average holiday, sick time buyout, and related fringes, That is included in the overall total cost of the agreement, but it is not included in the monthly payments. And I think they explain this fairly well, and that those are costs that are invoiced when those specific costs are incurred.
And one other question, how much influence do you or your staff have on the scheduling of the personnel?
Well, we work very closely with the lieutenant in charge of the task force for St. Clair. Are you talking about specifically for St. Clair County, sir?
That's correct.
Yes, so we do have influence over that, and we could suggest modifications. Obviously, that command level deputy runs that group, but we have a significant relationship with the individual in charge, which is Lieutenant Peters. We collaborate with him routinely, and he would be amenable to suggestions if we made them.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just thought of one more, Kevin, which is, so I understand and appreciate that you want this to be an 18-month contract so you can line everything up and all the contracts come due at the same time. Is that something that you think will help with the overall logistical piece of this, or is it really an efficiency, or is it really so that you can do some kind of a comparison when you're bidding these when you're negotiating these contracts between the three organizations? And perhaps that's something you hadn't thought of.
Yeah, so I do think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is it more for organizational and logistical efficiency, or is it because there's different costs involved and you're trying to get a handle on all those?
There are different costs involved, and we're trying to get a handle. So we haven't made any major modifications to any of these contracts since we started in September of 2018. So I'm trying to get a handle on cost impact. I do think that the way the law enforcement task force, meaning the collaboration between the three agencies, is structured, I do think there are some efficiencies that we could take a look at moving forward. And that's why I wanted to align all the contracts so that we could work through what I think we could maybe focus on some of the operational aspects of how we conduct business, and maybe take a look at how we can marry more together as opposed to being separate entities, if that makes sense.
It does. And the one thing I would recommend is at the board meeting, for the members that aren't here, that you be able to give a little bit of information about how the contracts are currently structured, and the timelines, and the fact that you're looking for efficiency overall, but you're also looking for potentially economies of scale. I think that would be helpful. I would appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Hearing none, a motion is needed to approve the agreement.
So moved.
More seconds.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great, thank you. Talby, I'm sorry, on operation, do we have any unscheduled business?
We do not, Chair. We are ready for operation.
Great.
Very good. Thank you. So I'd like to start by addressing Mr. Villa's comments. We hear from Mr. Villa on a regular basis, and are in communication with him continuously. Okay. So the particular comments that you got this morning, we've actually prepared, my planning team has prepared a response to Mr. Villa, and I'd like, please indulge me in reading that response to you to address the things that you heard earlier. So regarding the number 70 grand, we are unfortunately still experiencing some missed trips, particularly in evenings, due to specific workforce issues. We have already begun working on corrective actions that should help improve the specific issue of evening missed trips on the number 70 Grand, which, as you note, is a very important route in our network. We do have managerial resources assigned to this route, and although we cannot have a manager solely stationed or floating between bus stops only on this route, there are absolutely personnel dedicated to monitoring the number 70. We're continuing to explore creative solutions to the workforce issues we're facing that impact this and other routes. And so we welcome your sharing your experiences to help us improve. Mr. Ville has always given us good recommendations, and we are always responding to him and following up. As for the recent experiences you report regarding detours of the number 90 and number 34, we do work closely with partners around the region when there are events that create reroutes of our service. We strive to keep this information as up to date as possible and to communicate it in a timely manner to our customers. Our standard practice is for rider alerts to be posted electronically, and if we are given enough notice by external partners, we will get rider alert signage posted at the impacted bus stops. We appreciate you calling attention to these particular cases, and we're looking into resolving any inefficiencies that may have occurred, since we want to get information out to our customers as soon as we can. So that is a written response that we have prepared to send to Mr. Villa. Are there any comments or suggestions that the board might want to include? Okay, well, if not, I'd like to move forward with my performance update. I'm going to talk about ridership today, and then workforce shortages and some of the things that we have in the works in terms of assisting us in dealing with some of these issues. In terms of ridership, I'd like to put that in perspective. On a system-wide basis in fiscal year 20, we had 30 million boardings. In fiscal year 21, we had 17 million. So let's look at that in comparison to our current ridership. Starting with Metrolink, fiscal year 20, we had 10.5 million boardings. In 21, we had 5.5. So that was down 47%. In 22, year to date, we have 5.2 million riders or boardings, which is up 16.7% year to date. I think our Metrolink increases. One of the things that's contributing to that is the Cardinals and the Blues and people coming downtown again for sporting events. As it relates to Metro Bus, in 2020, we had 19.2 million boardings. In 21, we had 11.5, which is down 40%. Year to date, we've had 9.6 million boardings, which is up 1% again year to date. So our year to date figures that are reported on our performance summary are showing increases compared to 21, which was significantly down from the previous year of 2020. Colorado, 2020, we had 413,000 boardings. In 21, 411. So that number is kind of the same number, but in 22, we're down to 290,000 year to date. That's down 15.4%. A lot of our issues with Colorado have to do with the availability of not only operators, but our fleet, the availability of vans. In April, there were 47.4 thousand requests for Colorado service. We had 8.7 thousand denials. which is a significant number. And we're trying to increase our efforts to alleviate that problem. As it relates to our workforce, I'm giving you numbers as of May 19th. Metrolink, out of 102 budgeted positions, operators were down 8. Bus, out of 789 positions, we're down 133. We have 17 trainees in process at this time for bus. For call ride, out of 102 operators, we're down 52, which is significant and indicates why we have the issues that we're having with call ride services. For mechanics overall, all types of mechanics, bus mechanics, electromechanics, we have a total of 373 budgeted. We're down 62. We have 5 trainees in process. You know, although our efforts are paying off as it relates to attracting applicants, what we need to focus on right now is once we get them trained and keeping them on board. We've had service adjustments, and we're planning another one for June 13th. You know, we had our service adjustment in November where we decreased service by 10%, including cutting some routes or eliminating some routes. In March, we had another 5% reduction, which is more of a tweak, more of a changing in frequency, that type of thing. And in this upcoming June adjustment is basically to add some things back, move some things around as we get a better handle on what our ridership demand is. So what are we trying to do to alleviate the situation? Service adjustments are certainly one thing. Another thing is our bonus situation, our sign-on bonuses, our retention bonuses, our referral bonuses. We had 325 new hires since we implemented the sign-in bonus. We've had 36 referral bonuses, and all of our retention bonuses have been paid out at this time. I have convened a group within Metro operations, specifically in bus, to focus on how do we retain the employees that we're bringing in and our current operators. So we're focusing on not only enhancing our recruiting, but focusing on training and retention and operator interaction. We now have a group within our bus operations that is maintaining individual statistics on each of our drivers in terms of on-time performance, attendance, all of those kinds of stats. And we are actually focusing on reaching out and touching these operators when they're in the facility and reviewing that information with them. And it's amazing when you talk to people one-on-one and you tell them how they're doing. There's a lot of good things that they are really proud of. And there's some things that are not so good, and they kind of commit to working on those things. So that personal touch, I think, is really working at this time. We did this, we had safety awards last week at each one of our bus facilities. Awards were given to drivers with 5 years accident-free, 10 years, 25 years. Really fantastic event, and I think very much appreciated by our team. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as it relates to our operations.
I've got one kind of overarching question, and it's regarding the missed trips. And I think everybody in this meeting knows what that comes from. And it's, you know, the driver shortage, and then that has resulted in service changes. And we're sort of in this loop that we're trying to fight our way out of. And, you know, obviously want to commend the board and Bi-State for coming up with some creative solutions so far to sort of triage that situation. You know, we've done the incentive program, which looks like it's having a little bit of impact. And then we've even, you know, opened the book and increased wages a little bit. which is a slightly unorthodox practice, but I think was the right thing to do. But when looking at these numbers in the slide with Metro Bus and caller ride operators, 135 came in for Metro Bus, 33 candidates in progress. So of 135 applications that were received, 33 candidates were, I guess, deemed qualified or move forward from there. And then after that, we have 17 trainees in progress. But I guess my question there, and this is, a broader scope question, because I think everybody's intent here is to, make sure we're not missing any more trips and not cutting any more service on our bus and caller ride. And I don't think we get there until we get a handle on this operator situation, obviously. What do you think is causing the lag between or the drop off between the applications received and the candidates in progress across the line? Are there things that we can do to help those numbers, or are these, requirements put on us by FTA and other things that we can't change that are causing us to lose, that are causing us to have people filtered out from applications received to candidates in progress? Or is there any action the board can take, bi-state can take, to get those numbers up? Because it seems like having 135 come in for Metro Bus and then 33 candidates in progress, I mean,
Well, certainly one of the issues is the qualifications of the candidates, their ability to go through the scrutiny of the background checks and things of that nature. So we lose quite a few in that process. But there are a number of other factors that come into play. What we're finding, so one of the things that we've implemented is we're kind of putting mentors together with these candidates when they come through the door. Somebody that you are dealing with that is helping to walk you through the process. So I think that is helping, so people don't get lost, okay? They don't get lost in the process. The other issue is the competition. The competition is intense for these potential operators that we're recruiting. Everybody's looking. One of the things we found is that the first 3 weeks of training, in your first 3 weeks, you get your CDL. We're losing half of our candidates right then. They're just, as soon as they get that CDL, they walk, they take it someplace else, okay? We're actually finding that, and again, these are things that we're drilling down on right now to see what we can do differently to maintain that. Maybe we're trying to attract candidates that already have a CDL. So then that's not an issue. They came to us with it, so their intention is to stay here. We find that basically when we recruit, we bring in people, we have as many as 60% of the candidates we lose within the first 6 weeks, within the training period. They never make it out of training. So we're trying to find some things, the term that Talby uses to make us more sticky. We're trying to figure out some things that'll enhance our ability to maintain these candidates. We're looking at our training programs, what they're focusing on. I think we need to make people aware of what it is they will be facing. We have a union shop. Assignments are based on seniority. If you're the new guy on the block, then you're not going to get the best route. And we're trying to work with our unions also in order to change some of those things. They need to help us to help them get more members. So that's part of the process too. So there are a number of things involved here. And I have commissioned a group that includes our training people and our operations people, and we're trying to figure this thing out. Hopefully we can make some progress, because it's one thing to recruit. I think our talent management team, they've increased their efforts. They've enhanced their ability to bring people in. Now we got to work on keeping.
Thank you for your work on this. And the good news is the 325 new hires since the bonus began. I think that shows that, we got part of the problem at least partially solved. We just got to work on the rest of it. And if there's anything else, I think that, any other modifications or supports you would need from the board to help keep people in. I understand there are a lot of different factors here. There are, federal guidelines you have to comply with, and budgetary constraints, and a whole bunch of other things. But I just wanted to highlight this as something that I'm still, and I think most of the board is still very interested in, because it impacts our number one product, which is bus and call a ride service. So thank you, and please continue to keep us informed.
Yes, I have a question. Do they go through orientation with the union too? Do you all work together throughout that orientation?
Yes, the union does do an orientation. After we bring people on board, they are, we call it, have an onboarding process that does include the union in an orientation. Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question. It's Deborah Moore. Mr. Stewart, the question is, and I'm kind of going back to where Mr. Gladney was, of the 325, not knowing that process, maybe it's been a year. It says, since 2021, I don't know if it's quite been a year yet. When you talked about losses early on, is there a requirement for a new hire to pay back or give back that bonus or that sign-on bonus or any portion of it if they depart prior to some term, a year, 2 years, or whatever?
Well, actually, there's a time. The bonus is timed. You have to complete training first to get part of it, and then I think there's a 6-month interval after that, and maybe the balance after a year. So they're not making it that long.
Okay. Do you have any stats on how many of this 325 you've lost?
I do. I don't have them at my fingertips right now, but I do have all of that information. And maybe what I'll do going forward is to start sharing some of that type of information, the stats that operations is maintaining now, down to the individual driver level. I think that would be very helpful to the board to see that information.
And one final question, you're having several, and you're participating in several job fairs. Are you realizing success in certain areas, greater in some areas as opposed to others? And maybe there could be a focus with that organization who's sponsoring the job fair, if it's not you or in that area, if it seems to be a driver for your receipt of applications.
Yeah, I think that we do. I'm not really, I don't know where our best success is. I think it's probably in the job fairs that we hold ourselves. We hold them at our facility like every other Saturday or something like that. Then we know that the people that show up are looking for us. And they're the people that we are looking for, as opposed to going to a job fair, say that's sponsored like the Urban League or something like that. You have a variety of people.
We have competing
may or may not, right. Well, yeah, we have direct competition sitting across from us, yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a comment question for Mr. Stewart.
Sure.
Chuck, you talked about the awards that you handed out. Is there any way that gets out to the public, or is that just something that's done internally?
Well, it's done internally. We take pictures. I know we put it in our internal correspondence and that kind of thing. Let me check on that, because I think that could help in terms of our image moving forward. Let's see if we can do something like that.
Well, and what I would recommend moving forward too is, just speaking for myself alone, that when you have a situation like that, or you have a program, I would like to know about that, because I think it's important that our staff knows that they're getting the support from the commissioners, because I know we all know we have to have them. And I think we need to show our appreciation. And I know over in St. Clair County, the transit district there kind of does appreciation lunches and things of that sort. So anything like that, I would like to be made aware of, to where if I can make my schedule available, I would like to attend, just to show the staff how appreciative the commissioners are.
I appreciate that. I think that is fantastic. I personally attended, with 3 different bus garages, 3 different days, and I personally tried to attend as much time as I could during that process, because our operators do need to know that we appreciate them.
Very good. Thank you for your all you're doing too. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I just have one, Chuck. Thank you for this report. What would be helpful would be you have recruiting and training pipeline information for a month at a time.
Mm-hmm.
If you could provide that over the course of the year so that we can see
Okay.
how things are going in terms of whether recruiting is going up, is going down, whether there's certain months that are better than others. And when you said that you lose 60% of trainees, do you know why?
We do have exit conferences when we can. When we can, for the most part, most that we lose, they just don't show up one day.
That's what I thought.
They just don't show up. And they're usually the candidates that they start out having absences and that type of thing. Whenever we can, we try to have an exit conference. Usually it's for some type of personal reason or they got another job. Yeah.
That's why this is such a difficult and, really constant situation that has to be dealt with, whether or not we're in a bad, whether hiring is difficult or whether we're at full capacity. I imagine that this takes a tremendous amount of your staff's time and energy. And I just want to say I appreciated it. It's hard to attract and retain people to do difficult jobs like, working in transit. Any other thoughts?
What is your hiring age starts at?
21.
21, okay,
Basically, yes.
okay,
You got to be 21 to get a CDL.
okay. Thank you.
Although we are considering hiring younger people and assigning them to things that they don't necessarily need a CDL for, trying to get them internally in the pipeline. So
I have a question, suggestion, and you can throw this out. I understand you guys have a lot of data and you're certainly considering things. Is there a chance? You said they get their CDL at 3 weeks and a lot of people leave after those 3 weeks. Is there a chance, which makes some sense, is there a chance that we could, look at potentially doing a small bonus like if you're there for 4 weeks, you get an extra X $100 or something. I just know from I was in the Army for a while, and the way they would structure their bonuses is they figured out when the time was folks were leaving, and they would offer them a little bit of bonus to sweeten it up to keep them there. I'm sure you guys have employment practices and you have considered this. I just wanted to throw that out as something for you guys to possibly consider, see if it makes sense from your end, and if so, talk about it. But that was just an idea I had. Not to be the good idea fairy, because I don't like that guy, but I will be in this instance.
Well, we appreciate all the advice we can get, okay? I will run it by the team for sure.
Thanks for this good discussion this morning. The next item on the agenda is a President CEO report. Talby, do you have any comments?
Good morning, Commissioners. I will keep this brief and direct. So first of all, we have had really great breakthrough discussions on expansion of the Metrolink system through the north side, south side alignments. And because of that, and because of these developments, I plan to give a more formal presentation on that alignment at our June meeting, which will be on the 24th. But please, I encourage any commissioner, if they want to hear any update on the interim, to please give me a call. These are really important momentum builders as far as federal funding is concerned with that, and I'm happy to discuss that very, very good, strong partnerships with both the city and county at looking at the alignment. And we actually had the FTA administrator in town and gave him a briefing on where we thought the project was going. The point being that the efficiency and the attention that it's getting is, it feels like a momentum builder. So I'm excited to give that briefing on the 24th. Additionally, I'm moving forward on budget discussions with all three of our funders. We are through the Ways and Means in the city of St. Louis with no objections to our current budget, and we're looking at a appointment through the ENA 3-member committee in mid-June. Also, on Tuesday, we will be on communications with the county council. Slight delay there having to do with just how much that the county council has on its docket. And additionally, I assigned Tammy Fulbright and Chuck Stewart to negotiations directly with St. Clair County Transit District. We did review some of those contracts yesterday. I'm looking at them right now. They are moving things forward. I am hopeful. We have a few small issues to work out, but I'm hopeful that we can get there. Again, another great client, but we do need to grind through these agreements and be sure that they are rigorous and fair. So all of that is moving along, and I just want you all to know as commissioners. And that concludes my President and CEO report for operations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Talby?
Yeah, I have one. Talby, on the north-south connection that you mentioned, is there, on that alignment, has there been any deviation on what was originally discussed as far as moving some of it?
Yes, so one thing is that we did with the consulting group, and of course as part of what my tasking is to look at the original alignment that was proposed basically on a 2018 basis and see essentially what is affordable given the resources that we have and also how the region has changed. So we did simplify the proposal right now. We are in the midst of it. It has not been approved. We did simplify that alignment, and it is centered around Jefferson Avenue, which brings the cost down and makes it a much more competitive alignment as far as I'm concerned. That's obviously my job, is to be sure that these projects are competitive and also that they can be cost within the constraints of what our taxing capacity is. I will note a very important aspect of this is that this is right now city only, and the good part of the finances is that we can make it with city-only resources. Obviously, the taxing capacity of only the city, so no extra cost to St. Clair County or no extra cost to the county, at least in this initial phase. The next phase would then move to St. Louis County, and making it efficient and simple is something that makes sense. A really key component of that is capitalizing on the assets that the region is investing in, one of which is we have a nice big soccer stadium that is going in Midtown there, and we would then have 2 new stations under this alignment that would be within a block of that soccer stadium. So that's a change that should drive ridership. And the point that I want to make there is not that the 2018 study does not have a lot of really good merit. It does. We just have a slight tweaking, and a lot of that really valuable information is just informing a slight tweaking having to do with efficiency, cost, and what are the new assets to drive ridership.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I know we'll be hearing more about that in the future here. One last question. You mentioned the St. Clair County negotiations. That contract is coming up for expiration. Are you confident that we're going to be able to get that done before then?
I hope to. We need to, the bus side of the contract is the hardest part. I think we're in agreement with 2/3 of the contract. There are some revisions having to do that I need to quantify with the potential to add service that the district has asked for under some of their ideas under Transit Vision 2020, and I need to quantify that to be sure that we can make the numbers work. So that will take some time. I'm sorry, Commissioner Simmons, just to be honest, I think we got a good shot at it.
Okay, good. And I liked your comment that, it's going to be fair and for both parties involved. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Thank you, Talby.
Mhm.
Myra, may we have dates for future meetings?
Yes, the next Board of Commissioners meeting will be held on Friday, June 24th at 8:30 a.m. The next Safety and Security meeting will be held on Thursday, August 11th at 8:30 a.m. And the next Operations and Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee meetings will be held on Friday, August 19th at 8:30.
Thank you. If there's no further business, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. We'll have the Finance Committee meeting next.
And we are ready. Thank you.
I'll call the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee meeting to order. Roll call, Myra, please.
Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Commissioner Simmons,
Present.
Commissioner Costello, Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Gladney,
Present.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Present.
Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Galladay, Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Present.
Myra, under public comment, were there any speaker cards received for today's committee meeting?
No public comments were submitted.
In that case, we'll go to item 4, approval of the March 18th AFA Committee open meeting minutes. You all received a copy of the minutes in your packet. Are there any comments, additions? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved.
More seconds.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 5, contract award, audit services for the Bi-State Development Pension Plans and 401k Retirement Savings Program. Tom Curran, I believe you will comment.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. The first contract being presented for your consideration is a request to authorize a contract with UHY LLP for audit services for the Bi-State Development Pension Plans and 401k Retirement Savings Program. On January 26, a solicitation was released for audit services for these programs, and to encourage bidding, 8 qualified firms were contacted prior to the bid date. Despite this outreach effort and the solicitation being publicly advertised on our iSupplier portal, only one sealed bid was received from UHY LLP. The Benefits Department reviewed the UHY bid and determined that the bid was responsive and in conformity with the terms and the conditions of the solicitation. UHY's bid was compared to the independent cost estimate prepared by Bi-State staff, and it was determined to be fair and reasonable. There was less than a $3,000 difference between our cost estimate and the bid from UHY. Because only one firm submitted a bid, the sealed bid method is being converted into a negotiated procurement. Funding for this contract will be generated by pension trust accounts and the 401k administrative cost. Management is recommending that the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee forward to the Board of Commissioners for approval a recommendation for a 5-year contract with UHY LLP for audit services for Bi-State's pension plans and 401k retirement savings program in the not to exceed amount of $302,445. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for Tom? If not, we need a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Do we need a roll call or a voice vote?
Voice vote sufficient.
I will be abstaining. I have a very close friend who works at UHY. She normally just handles business returns and whatnot, but she does take a lot of professional development courses annually related to pensions audits. So I'm going to abstain. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me? Anyone opposed? And I will abstain. Item 6, contract award, financial advisory services. Tom, you're up again.
The next agenda item is a request to award a contract to Columbia Capital Management for financial advisory services for the Bi-State Development Bond Program. A solicitation was released on February 25th requesting financial advisory services for our bond indebtedness and other financial operations. Only one sealed bid was received, which was forwarded to the Finance Department for review. The department's analysis confirmed that the Columbia Capital Management proposal met the requirements, qualifications, and experience described within the scope of work. Because only one bid was received, the contracting officer surveyed the other potential sources that chose not to submit a bid, and those responses are included in your briefing paper. One firm decided to submit a proposal for bond counsel services instead of financial advisory services. Another firm did not complete the necessary registration, and the third was recently acquired by another company, which did not respond to our follow-up contacts. A comparison of Columbia Capital Management's cost proposal to the previous cost proposal from 2017 demonstrates that the new costs are fair and reasonable. Management is recommending that the committee approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a request to enter into a 5-year contract with Columbia Capital Management for financial advisory services in the not to exceed amount of $400,000.
Any questions for Tom regarding this matter? If not, we will need a motion to approve, please.
More.
I believe we have a motion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passed. Moving along, item 7. Tom, you're up again for several items under item 7. Board policies regarding purchasing revisions.
This next agenda item is a request to revise the collected board policies of Bi-State Development Agency in regard to purchasing. Bi-State's purchasing policy was last updated in May 2014. Since that time, there have been dramatic changes in the economy, as we all know, that have affected the cost and availability of items and services necessary for Bi-State's operation. We're proposing policy revisions in 3 areas. Number 1, to increase the thresholds of contracts requiring approval by the Board of Commissioners. Number 2, to add language clarifying what happens when there is only one bidder in a competitive procurement. And third, to clean up spelling and title errors in the current policy. So first, the language from 2014 in our existing policy states that the Board of Commissioners must approve competitive negotiation procurements exceeding $500,000 and non-competitive procurements which exceed $100,000. Right now, the President and CEO is authorized to approve all competitive bid procurements, in other words, price-only sealed bids, competitive negotiation procurements that do not exceed $500,000, and non-competitive procurements of $100,000 or less. We are proposing that the President and CEO be authorized to approve non-competitive procurements of up to $200,000 and competitive negotiation procurements of up to $1 million. Second, there is no language in the current purchasing policy regarding what happens when there is a single bid in a competitive procurement, which you've noticed that comes up quite a lot now. We would like to clarify in those situations that the procurement should be converted into a negotiated procurement. And in the new rules that we're proposing that the President have the authority to approve up to $1 million. Third, we'd like to correct errors in the current policy regarding capitalization of proper names, references to positions in the agency that no longer exist, and obsolete references such as concessions for pay telephones. Each of these 3 recommendations has value in terms of updating our policies and management is asking that the committee consider these revisions in whole or in part to modernize our purchasing policy. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chair, I have I myself would like to review this further. I think it's a big step going forward, so I will be voting no on this until I digest this and get some more answers.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Simmons, that's consistent with my question. I wonder what is the impetus for what appears to be a pretty drastic change in procurement policy. So I'd just like to get a greater detail, and maybe it's been presented previously in some form or fashion, but I'd like to get some understanding of why this is necessary. What we're seeing is sort of a reduction of authority placed in single individuals as opposed to greater, when you're operating at this scale.
Mr. Roach, you want to comment?
Sure. I think it certainly makes sense to discuss these issues because it is a big change. I do think that we are seeing a major movement in the market. So, for instance, there was 2 agenda items where we only had one responsive bidder, and that is becoming a much more common occurrence under what we're seeing in the current market conditions. And we just felt it would be more efficient, especially when there are negotiated procurements, and we mentioned that we do have detailed procedures as far as that's concerned. One of the things that Mr. Curran noted on that single bidder on a contract that we just authorized is that we call and solicit from the other bidders to be sure that the solicitation was indeed rigorous. But these procedures are important, and what we're trying to do is figure out what that important line is so that we are doing the reasonable business to the board and not bogging down board business. You all know we have an operating budget of roughly $330 million on an annual basis, so that means we have a lot of money moving through, and we just need to establish where that comfortable line is. We can move along. I actually talked with Mr. Curran specifically about this. We can move along and do business, not revising these limits. We just think it would be a good idea given the current market conditions. But certainly reviewing the data on why and what that line is, that is the board's fiat. And I think it's very important that the board be extremely comfortable on a unanimous basis. And I think it makes sense if we want to take a little bit more time with it, review details that, for instance, Commissioner Moore and Commissioner Simmons have asked for. They're available. It's not a, we're not in a hurry here, for instance. We have plenty of time to consider these issues. This would not affect anything, in the next few weeks. So I think it makes sense to take some time, and if commissioners would like to see some more information, we'll be happy to provide it.
Commissioner Beach, if I could add, the majority of contracts presented to the committee and the board of commissioners recently have been in excess of $1 million and would not be affected by the proposed changes. So I reviewed all the contracts presented in 2021 and 2022 to date. And the approvals that would have been affected by this policy would include our on-call public relations contract with the Hauser Group, bus and van inspection services, and then today's audit services and financial advisory services. So I do have an analysis that I can share as this is considered further. I also did an informal survey of other transit agencies to see what their thresholds were for board approval. And they're really all over the map, and I can share that with you too. For example, TriMet in Portland also has general manager approving contracts that do not exceed $1 million. LA Metro also has various rules with $1 million or more. SEPTA in Philadelphia has a variety of rules depending on what the type of contract is. So there's a lot of things that I can share with the commission, to the committee rather, to kind of discuss this further in the future. I'd be happy to do that.
I would recommend that. Mr. Roach contacted me and we discussed this. I personally don't really see a major issue with it, but since there is some concern, and I'm always willing, and I think it's important to get more data if it's available. I think, Tom, that is sound advice, and And Mr. Rhodes, I would recommend that, and fellow commissioners, that we postpone this until the next meeting or whenever it's appropriate. Any objection to that?
No, I just have one more question, actually, if it's okay.
Yes.
Tom, you talked about the non-competitive procurements, the $100,000 ceiling. How many competitive negotiation procurements have we had exceeding $500,000?
I'm not sure that I can answer that without doing some counting here.
Okay, that would be
But
helpful.
I do have a spreadsheet for the past 2 years, or 21 and 20. And I would say over $500,000. I would say it looks to be about 20, perhaps. But I'll certainly share the list with you.
Okay, so what would be helpful is, I know that our board books are really, really large, but when it's an issue that relates to board policy, particularly on the finance side, if we could have information that's a little bit more robust, such as what your data and why we're actually asking for this, that we can digest prior to either the committee or the board meeting, that would be really helpful. And I, as I said, this is a 450-page board book. It's not that we don't have enough to read, but something like this, you know, in the interest of moving things along from committee to board level, would be helpful to have a little bit more information prior to it coming up at the committee level. That's just my suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other comments? Myra or Barb, do we need to take a motion to postpone, or do we just move on and table it this time?
I would suggest having a motion that you want to defer this to the next either board or committee meeting, or when appropriate.
My motion would be to table it for a future date.
Can we, in lieu of waiting to the next AFA meeting, can we get the requested information, further information, and bring it to the next board meeting in a couple of weeks? Any objection to that?
I would include that in my motion, as long as I get some more of the information. And Tom said he could get it out to us. So
Commissioner Simmons so moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional comments? All in favor of Commissioner Simmons' motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
So be it. Moving along, item 8, along a similar vein, collected board policies related to the audit, finance, and budget. I'm going to ask Crystal Messner to make some comments in a presentation, please.
Good morning, commissioners. So today I would like to present to the committee for review and to recommend to the Board of Commissioners for approval a request to incorporate some revisions to the collective board policies, specifically for Chapter 30, Audit, Finance, and Budget. There were 3 sections that had some revisions. We'll start with 005, which is the Audit Committee Charter. The changes noted are primarily to reference best audit practices versus the reference to government auditing standards. And then we also wanted to correct some titles, especially as it relates to the Chief Audit Executive. For section 010, the annual audit, it included a reference to fuel hedging and to correct some references in other titles and names that were listed. For 020, internal audit, the changes noted are to correct the reference to the internal audit section and to other titles, especially as it relates again to the Chief Audit Executive. Are there any questions or comments on these recommended changes?
Any comments? If not, a motion to approve is needed.
So move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
More seconds.
Any additional comments? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Move along, item 9. Internal audit policies and procedures manual revision. Crystal, you're back up.
Thank you, Commissioner Beach. For this one is just our annual review, our internal audit policies and procedure manual. For this revision, we actually aligned our professional standards to the most recent version of the Institute of Internal Auditors International Professional Practices Framework, which is the standard that we use for our audits, the key standard we use for our audits, as we use many. And then we adjusted some work paper guidance to further our electronic file moving from paper. We also created some templates and revised them from old Word documents to easily filled PDFs for our audit customers. And then we also made a kind of an adjustment to our internal safety audit process, which was housed in this manual previously. And to bring us up to speed with the industry standard, we made it a standalone operating procedure, which is attached for agenda item number 12. And that's the standalone procedure. We just pulled it out and made it its own SSO standard, which is more appropriate industry-wide. And then, of course, our basic editorial changes. So I'd like to recommend that the committee approve the revisions as presented and, of course, push to the board for their approval.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Ayes have it. Moving along to item 10. The next several items are information only. Crystal, internal audit follow-up summary for the third quarter.
Yes, for information, commissioners, I would like to present our follow-up summary for our findings for the last third quarter of this fiscal year of 22. And this is just for informational purposes only. This time we actually included a graph. This is on page 326 of your board book. And as you can see, we have completed 72% of those follow-ups successfully. I would love to take credit for this, but of course our bi-state and Metro management and of course their direct reports are responsible for getting these completed timely. So I want to commend them on their efforts. We have 18% outstanding, which just means it's open. And we have about 10% that's overdue. This goes back to shortages of staff and just kind of getting these followed up. But we are actively working with everyone on that 10% that's overdue right now to get those in an acceptable area. And that concludes my follow-up summary for this quarter.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Crystal, do you know potentially when you'll be up to caught up with all the audits? And first, I commend you for doing yeoman's work on this, but I'm just wondering how long it's going to take to get the overdue ones done.
Just to keep it in a realistic perspective, there are a few, let me go down to the attachment here. There are a couple that they're kind of one and the same. For instance, with the payroll hours of service audit, as you can see, there's 3 overdue. And then there's an SSO compliance, federal, state, and local that is actually kind of overlaps with our hours of service. There are 2 there that are overdue. So in thinking about that, 5 of them are really a very combined finding. Hours of service is very complicated. This is FTA guided. It's a regulation that we have to follow. So we want to make sure that we're following multiple, regulations there and aligning it with obviously our operations and having a reasonable expectation there. So we're working with multiple groups to actually accomplish this. Instead of one, we're working with operations, we're working with IT, we're working with safety. So this is just we brought together a team that we're actually working together on to get these accomplished. For some of the other ones, we are just actively working with management. As I said, staff shortage kind of presents itself as an issue right now to get some of these pushed forward. But I'm hoping that by the fall, next quarter, we can have at least some acceptable date limits on this. And interimly, so all of the commissioners know, our practice, or the current practice that I have, is that management and the responsible parties for that process have to give me a status update that I feel is somewhat on track with a successful completion at a future date, if they change that.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Commissioner, may I comment?
Yes.
So one of the aspects, and I apologize, sometimes going over the plumbing of the organization is not as exciting as others, and there's a lot of details here. An what our chief audit executive will not say is what we have done is we've embedded her processes within an arc of improvement. We're using this audit function and this very strong internal audit department to guide some of our targeting at some of our, well, really at the organization's flaws, where our vulnerabilities. And I would point out not only to these reports, but also to the details contained within them, and in particular with looking at some of the reports associated with things like Procurement audit and risk assessments. These are vital for us to get our quote unquote plumbing right, our fundamentals right, and we have a lot of work to do there. And these reports are, although they feel a little detailed and boring, I please point the commissioners to them. They're excellent, and they've been very helpful in improving the arc of the organization.
Mr. Chairman, comment. Crystal, you talked about the staff shortage. Are you talking about needing more staff to help complete some of these projects?
Not necessarily in my area. It's in the other areas. So management is responsible for these corrective action plans and to implement them. With staff shortages, it's just becomes a harder accomplishment for them, on top of accomplishing multiple other activities that need to continue with staff shortages.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Very good. Thumbs up. Along that line, item 11, Crystal, we're back to you. The internal audit status report, third quarter.
Yes. So for the internal audit third quarter status report, I'm very, very excited to report out that Herb, I'm glad you just mentioned that, because for our proper succession planning and some organizational alignment that I've been trying to do for our internal audit department, we welcomed Bob Geckner as a new internal auditor, and he comes from our operations. He's a tenured employee, and we are very excited to have him, and he has already provided some exceptional operational knowledge to our audits and filled that gap. But also on the same circumstance, due to some unforeseen circumstances within our payroll department, our payroll audit that was planned actually for this quarter of this fiscal year that we're currently in, we had to move to next fiscal year. But instead, we decided to go ahead and begin a system access and a physical access audit earlier than expected. I planned these for next year, so we actually already currently started those, moved those forward as they're higher risk at the moment. Of course, this report highlights, current audit activities and special projects that we work on, and has some follow-up hours as well for information. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Crystal? Any comments? Again, thank you. And we'll move on to item 12, the state oversight status report for the first quarter. Crystal.
Thank you. To present to the board, just informational for our safety and security oversight audits that we perform annually. We did, this is a huge feat for us. So I want to say that for starters, this is the first year that I know that we've ever been early with our annual state safety and security oversight review and certification, which is required from us to be submitted to our bi-state safety and security oversight. And that is due before February the 1st of every year. And we were able to submit that about 10 days early, I believe. And then that resulted in of course, an efficient effect of getting a return approval from them on February 25th of 2022. Last year, it was towards the end of April, beginning of May before we could move forward with that. So this is an exceptional improvement. Our audits last year, as we've discussed previously, we did outsource that activity, at least the audit work itself. We still represent our agency, Internal Audit does, and myself. But that did result in 9 approved internal audit SSO caps. So those SSO caps are just like our internal audit caps. They're a little bit more formal as we share with our BSSO counterparts. But we are all continuing to collaborate with management, and we're monitoring the progress for those open SSO audits and also SCADA caps. We've included that with our SSO for the first time more recently. So we have a significant amount of caps with our BSSO. However, it is so much more efficient now. We're meeting monthly. We have 2 monthly meetings, and our Chief Safety Officer, Andrew Easy, actually kind of facilitates this along with myself. I participate very actively. And we are every month requiring a status update on these corrective action plans, as they are imperative to correct. And I have to say they're all timely. They're getting closed timely, and we've closed some gaps there that we had previously. And for our calendar year 2022 SSO internal audit planning processes, those are on schedule, and we have actually preliminary scheduled on-site field work for the week of September 12th. And we'll be, obviously, we have notified our internal and external audit customers of that, including our PSSO. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions, comments?
Great report. I appreciate all your hard work. I know, speaking for the board, you coming on board has really stirred what we needed to get corrected on some of those things.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Krista, for you and your team. Next up, Tammy Fulbright, will you discuss items 13 and 14, the quarterly financial statements and the treasurer's report?
Yes, good morning. So I will update you on the third quarter. So at March 31st, BSD's combined income before depreciation was $83.8 million. BSD had applied for additional federal stimulus funds, and as part of that application, all CARES funding needed to be drawn down. But unfortunately, we did not get apportioned any additional funding. So those CARES funds that we drew in will be used to support needs for the remainder of 22 and into 23 and further as needed. And then I just want to go through each one of the enterprises briefly. So income before depreciation. So most of that income that you see is in transit at $85.6 million before depreciation. 56 million is really residing in revenue of sources being brought in. And then also a reduction in expense is also making up that 85.6 million in income. And how those funds are being allocated is that they're being allocated to Illinois, and they'll be allocated to supplement sales tax and passenger revenue in Missouri. On the expense side, where we're seeing shortages, or the expenses aren't quite where we thought they would be, it's mainly regarding supply chain issues, workforce shortages, realized gains on the fuel hedge, and just timing. So we're working with the maintenance team as we're closing out this fiscal year to try to accrue and make sure that we capture anything that's causing supply chain issues, so we can record those material and parts that have been ordered but not yet received. And we did some of that last year, and some of those parts, even to date, we haven't received. For Riverboat Attractions, they're at $174,000 in income before depreciation. They budgeted a loss of $234,000 for 22, but they've almost doubled in the number of cruises they've had. So from 419 to 781. After depreciation, they have a minimal loss, but with future inspections and other capital replacement needs, we are looking at development of long-term planning for this enterprise. And we're currently looking at that, and we'll be continuing to look at that. For the airport, to date, we're at $352,000 in income before depreciation. 119 of that as a result of some operating funding received from IDOT and also additional recoveries on expenses related to a fire in a previous year. For losses, the Gateway Arch has a loss of $397,000, but this is primarily due to fees associated with the debt refunding. Overall, they're doing rather well, and we expect them to end up with income. Tram ridership increased from 115,000 through the third quarter of FY21 to 340,000 in FY22. Freightway is currently showing a loss of 177,000, but in the fourth quarter, we will be booking 200,000 in revenue to offset that. For cash and investments, by state directed funds were 304 million with an average rate of return of about 0.25%. And by state trustee directed funds were 48 million with an average rate of return of almost 1%. So the Fed is expected to continue to raise rates. So we're spreading out our investment purchases. They have a meeting next week. It is expected that we'll probably see another 0.5% increase. So we'll probably do a bid, an investment bid in July. In the first quarter, we did a bid for 27 million and bought Treasury and agency investments with an average yield of 1.35%. And then for the fuel hedge, I just want to kind of give you an update on where we are there. Year to date per gallon, including the hedge, we're paying $1.36 compared to $1.74 that we budgeted. So we have realized gains year to date at March of 2.9 million. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Very thorough. Any questions or comments? Well, thank you. We will move on to item 15, Treasury Safekeeping Accounts Audit, ending last March 31st of this year, I should say. Crystal?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Internal audit has determined that the safekeeping accounts that Tammy just mentioned, they do exist, and the respective balances and credit ratings reported in the Treasurer's report as of March 31st, 2022 are fairly presented. And of course, we provided a series of schedules that support our conclusion in the attachments that follow this briefing paper.
Very good. That's good to hear. Any questions or comments? That was also information only. We will go to the procurement report. Tom?
Thank you, Commissioner. So there are three components to this quarter's procurement report. We have the non-competitive procurement, the procurement card transaction report, and contract modifications report. At the end of the third quarter of fiscal year 22, non-competitive procurements totaled $3.2 million, or 8.4% of the total purchase order commitment volume of $38 million. Taking a longer view, over the past 12 months, non-competitive procurements totaled $9 million, or 8.4% of the total purchase order volume of $107.9 million. The 12-month rolling average of non-competitive spending was 14.4% in the second quarter, compared to the current 8.4% at the end of the third quarter. And as I mentioned previously, although we've been experiencing a decrease in the percentage of non-competitive procurements lately, sole source needs related to technology and system upgrades will probably change this pattern in the near future. Also included in the procurement report is the procurement card transactions report for the third quarter. So far in fiscal year 22, there have been 10,696 transactions, totaling $3.3 million on procurement cards. There have been 7 transactions in the fiscal year that have been determined to have violated procedures out of 10,000 transactions, or 0.1% of the total. The final item is the contract modifications report, which lists contracts that have been changed in the third quarter of this fiscal year. The majority of those have been the addition of option years on previously approved contracts, plus one instance of a time extension with no additional cost. So that concludes the procurement report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments for Tom? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on. Unscheduled business. Toby, do you have any unscheduled business?
I do not, Commissioner Beach, and I have no report except to thank everybody for their patience through this very important issues.
Thank you. Mara, would you provide once again upcoming board and committee meeting dates?
The next Board of Commissioners meeting will be held on Friday, June 24th. The next Safety and Security meeting will be held on Thursday, August 11th. And the next Operations Committee, as well as the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee meetings will be held on Friday, August 19th. All of the meetings will begin at 8:30 a.m.
Thank you. If there's no further business, do I have a motion to adjourn this committee meeting?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. The combined meeting of the Audit, Finance, Administration, and the Operations Committee will follow this momentarily. Thank you.
We are ready to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the meeting of the combined meeting, I should say, of the Audit, Finance, Administration, plus the Operations Committee. Call the meeting to order. Roll call, Mara.
Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Present.
Commissioner Simmons,
Present.
Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Galladay, Commissioner Costello, Commissioner Moore,
Present.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Cox, and Commissioner Gladney.
Present.
Thank you. We need a motion to go into the executive session. Do I have a motion for the committee to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing legal, confidential, or privileged matters as permitted under the Bi-State Development Board Policy, Chapter 10, Section 10.080 D1 Legal, D3 Personnel, D5 Employee Negotiations, and D10 Auditors?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Gladney,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Aye.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
and Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we need a roll call?
No, we can proceed to the votes.
Okay. The board has reconvened to our open meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the ATU Local 788 Operations and Maintenance and Clerical Collective Bargaining Agreement Negotiation Parameters as presented?
Simmons, so moved.
Second.
4 seconds.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Gladney.
Aye.
The motion passed.
Thank you. You have a motion to accept the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Locals 2 and 309 Collective Bargaining Agreement Negotiation Parameters as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Gladney,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the draft procurement card program audit as presented?
Moore moves.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Abstain.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Gladney.
Aye.
The motion passed.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the fiscal year 2023 annual audit work plan as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Gladney,
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Winmiller,
Aye.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Thank you. And if there's no further business, I would request a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second. I'm gonna say it.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion is adjourned. Everyone have a great weekend.
Thank